going on, guys? Good afternoon. Welcome back to United View. Hope everyone is doing very well. And some takeover updates. And we thought, shame on us. Shame on all of us for thinking we were going to get some form of a resolution today, because obviously we knew coming into today, it was reported yesterday, late last night, that there were more takeover delays, or a couple of days ago, that there was more takeover delays. And despite the initial optimism from some that certainly we would get an end or conclusion to this takeover process, and the 25% acquisition of Ineos, Sir Jim Ratcliffe of Manchester United taking control of sporting affairs would be ratified and confirmed on Thursday. We knew that today that wasn't going to happen, despite that boardroom meeting happening this afternoon. But now, actually, the breaking news at this lunchtime is that not only is it not happening anytime soon, certainly today, but also it could take weeks or even longer. So much so that despite Sir Jim Ratcliffe wanting sporting control of Manchester United and wanting to have oversight and control of sporting decisions at the club, the takeover, well, the acquisition, because it's not a takeover, but the acquisition, and actually, I guess, a roadmap to a takeover, might not even be completed until January. All of those things that Ratcliffe is looking for to make an immediate impact in January, it might not happen because it might not be completed by that point. It wouldn't be Manchester United if there weren't delays after delays after delays. So be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. Not because of that news, but certainly just support if you want. But let's get into this because it comes from an article from Mike Keegan. And again, I guess we shouldn't be surprised, but it's Manchester United. Just when you thought, again, we were going to get to an end point, a conclusion to this, we could maybe start to look forward, whether you like it or not, whether you're happy with the outcome or not. We could look forward, but yet again, we find ourselves coming to a close of an international break, really in the same situation as we were going into it. Nevertheless, it's been reported by Mike Keegan from Mail Sport that Sir Jim Ratcliffe's deal to take a 25% stake in Manchester United may not be completed in time for the opening of the January transfer window. Of course, it had been hoped that the investment of around £1.4 billion would be ratified at a board meeting, which is due to be held Thursday afternoon. However, lawyers are continuing to work on the finer details of what is a complex agreement, and insiders have warned that a final agreement could take, and this is a quote here, it could take weeks. Should that be the case, the New York Stock Exchange and Premier League requirements would make it unlikely that the British petrochemicals billionaire, who is expected to take control of football operations, would be in at Old Trafford for the turn of the year. Now, let's break that bit down first before we go into sort of the remainder of the article. This is why, when I can speak for myself here, because these are the questions I was raising. I was saying there's a lot of questions involved in all of this, and there's a lot of complexities that need to be ironed out. And when I was raising those questions previously, and this isn't a victory lap, I told you so, rah, rah, rah. It was just, for me, it was just logical that, okay, this has come together really, really quickly, not in terms of there was an agreement in principle, but the things that Jim Ratcliffe wants, the things that Ineos want, complete control over sporting matters, and also a roadmap to a full-fledged takeover of United, to acquire the majority voting power and to acquire the majority of the shareholdings at Manchester United. That's the key things that Ineos are looking for with this 25% acquisition. And I've raised those questions time and time again of how did they get to that point? What does that look like? What is being written down in black and white to ensure that all of those conditions are satisfied? And when I was mentioning that previously, why are you so anti-Sir Jim Ratcliffe? Why are you so anti-Ineos? I can't believe you were twerking for Qatari money. I can't believe you're this desperate to be part of a state-backed bid. And as I said time and time again, it's got nothing to do, for me personally, where the money's coming from, because I could care less about that. And it's not about, you want it to be state-backed. No. If Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos get to a point where they say we've acquired 25% of the club, and also we've got written down black and white on paper that we can acquire the full club by this date, it's not ideal because it's not 100% and it's not immediate and it's not a total clean slate, but it's a bit of light. It's a glimpse at the end of the tunnel. It's okay. We can get there. There is hope at the end of the tunnel. We can get to that point. But there's going to be resistance. There's always going to be resistance because you're still trying to purchase a club from some people that don't want to sell it. We've gone through this whole process. If really the Glazer family, particularly Joel and Avram, wanted to sell Manchester United, they had an offer on the table where they could have sold it and they could have washed their hands of it and got out of it, and they didn't want to do that. And the questions that I've raised previously were, if they didn't want to take between 5.5 to 6 billion pounds now, why in 3 or 4 years' time would they be willing to accept the same amount? They'd be wanting way, way more. Where is that money going to come from Ineos's point of view? They couldn't afford to put down 5 billion, 6 billion, maybe even more than that right now. So why would they in the course of 2 or 3 years when the value is going to go up even higher? In addition to that, as I've said before as well, this is a really unique and strange situation. You think about it. Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos, they've paid a premium. They've paid over the odds, £1.4 billion for 25% of Manchester United, a quarter of the business. And they want total control and autonomy over a massive aspect of the business, footballing and sporting operations. They're a football club. I mean, I get that it's much bigger than that nowadays. Manchester United is a global business. They're a publicly traded company. But still, the fundamentals of Manchester United, they are a football club. The analogy I've used before, and it's not completely accurate, but the analogy I've used before is it's like acquiring 25% of a restaurant, but you have complete autonomy and dictate exactly what goes on the menu, when you sell it, and how much you sell it for. You go, well, that's the business. That's the fundamentals of the restaurant, right? So it's somewhat unprecedented to get to that. So what is going to be written down? What is going to be written down on paper that satisfies Ineos, but also satisfies the Glazers? And that's the crux of the thing that is going to take some time. That is the crux of this agreement that is going to take longer than a few days. I mean, it had been reported by the likes of The Athletic and others that there was an agreement in principle between Ineos and the Glazer family, and I'm sure there still probably is. Look, the agreement in principle is we'll give you £1.4 billion for 25% of Manchester United. Some of those shares will come from the Glazer shares. Some of them will come from the minority shares. Okay, minority shareholders, cool. That's the agreement in principle. But those finer details of, okay, can we take over sporting control of the club? Yeah, okay. But what does that look like? What's our wiggle room? Are you going to overrule us at any point? You know, if you don't like the way things are going, can you overrule us? Or do we have total control? Do we have that written down on paper? You can't overrule us, despite the fact that technically you can, because you're the majority owners and you've got the majority of voting power. Yes, your voting power would be diluted because we've purchased some of your shares, but still, you would still have majority of control. All of those questions, and I think are valid questions going into all of it, and people kind of rolled their eyes when you put those questions out there. They're things that have to be figured out. And that's when you get into lawyers. I mean, as Mike Keegan says, it's a very complex agreement because it's somewhat unprecedented, some of the things that they're trying to do, particularly on the scale that they're trying to do it. Therefore, the agreement in principle is there, but this final agreement could take weeks. And therefore, there'll have to be another boardroom meeting. It'll have to get voted and on by the board of directors as well. So it could take time. And then even as the Daily Mail is pointing out here, once the agreement is reached and once it's voted upon and United and the Glazers and Ineos, they're happy with everything and you're assuming that that's the direction it will go in, but you never know. Then you have to get clearance from the New York Stock Exchange and the Premier League, and that will take a bit of a while as well. So even though today it's Thursday the 19th of October, and you would say, yeah, but that's like 2 and a bit months to go until January. The suggestion is that, as we get into sort of maybe the bureaucratic phase of this, it's going to take a bit longer and, more delays and more frustration. And that means, and this is quite the key aspect of this, for those that were maybe hoping for somewhat of an immediate impact in January from Ineos, bringing people in like Paul Mitchell, bringing people in like the former chief executive of Juventus, and he was general manager, chief executive of PSG, he was former general manager of Juventus as well. Stuff like that, those immediate things, that might not happen until January either. And I think what's fascinating also, and it's kind of lost in this article that Mike Keegan has written here, that actually the understanding from Mail Sport and Mike Keegan is that Manchester United are not planning any major moves in January, which I found kind of curious because I thought to myself, well, we just did a show this morning talking about Jadon Sancho and how he's most likely, it would be shocking if Jadon Sancho didn't leave Manchester United in January, whether it be permanently or on a loan. So if he's gone, I mean, as we got to the end of the summer transfer window, it was very evident that it was a one-in, one-out policy, or certainly a one-out, one-in, rather. We had to sell to buy. If Jadon Sancho does go in January, I would expect him to be replaced in some form. And this is kind of what Mike Keegan is touching upon here. He says, given the compliance of financial fair play rules, the view within the club is that players such as Harry Maguire would need to be sold or depart on loan to free space up to bring in new faces. So I think the idea of, United aren't planning on making any major moves in January. I mean, it's up to your determination and definition as to what a major move is, right? Some people would suggest that Harry Maguire, the former captain and England international, leaving and bringing a replacement in, that's a pretty major move. Jadon Sancho, the highest paid player at the club, leaving and bringing in a replacement, I don't think it would be a replacement on a similar wage or for a similar value. Most likely it might be a sort of lesser established player, but still that could be considered as a major move for United in January. In recent years, major moves have been considered sort of more Galactico signings, I suggest, but still there still could be movement in January. So the idea that we're not going to do anything, I think, is probably a bit of a stretch, certainly. But the idea that might be overseen by Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos, that's what people are questioning now. Are they actually even going to be involved by this point, or is it even going to be cleared? I mean, they could still be negotiating, or lawyers could still be getting involved by that point. Now, for those that are thinking, well, more delays means more chance for Sheikh Jassim and Qatar to get back involved, Mike Keegan is also writing that sources close to the bid team of Sheikh Jassim, Ratcliffe's main rival, who dramatically withdrew his offer for 100% of the club over the weekend, say there is, quote, zero chance he will return to the table. And that generally is the line that every journalist is saying at the moment, that no, once they've walked away, they're not coming back. Don't view this delay, or don't view this extra amount of time that it's going to take to figure out this complex agreement as an opportunity or a chance that Sheikh Jassim could come back. And look, I suppose you can say never in life, particularly when it comes to a party like Sheikh Jassim with the wealth that they have. The idea that they could at any point come back and put an astronomical amount on the table, it's possible. In the same way that the world could end tomorrow is possible, right? You can never rule out anything, right? It's not factually impossible. It's not like being resurrected or anything like that, right? It's technically possible, but it's incredibly unlikely, and I wouldn't hold out that much hope for it. But it's just, as I mentioned, it's just more frustration and it's more delays. So even if I think, and this is kind of where I sat on the matter, and I can only give my opinion on it, and you can let me know yours in the comment section below. Not that I was coming round to the idea, but one of the positives, and there really wasn't any for me with this situation because the Glazers were still at the club. One of the positives was that, well, at least there is going to be some change at United from a sporting point of view, and I was adopting a wait-and-see kind of approach, because if this 25% acquisition was ratified and then it was reported or revealed that there was this roadmap to a full takeover, and there was this roadmap for having the Glazers not be involved in the club at all, I said, I can get behind that. I really can. I can get behind that, and I can say it's not ideal. It's longer than I would like, but it's a way out. And it's light at the end of the tunnel. I can get behind that. And I was kind of adopting a wait-and-see approach. I thought maybe in the interim, before we even find out those bits of information, if we can get better people in from the sporting point of view, if there can be an overhaul from a sporting executive point of view, cool, that would benefit us. But my key thing still is, what does that roadmap look like? What are those clauses that are being put in place? How are you going to get the Glazers out of the club? Because that's what Ineos' line has been since the start, that this is just the first step. This is just a foot in the door. It's the first step of a full-fledged takeover. And if that is the case, and if they are serious about that, they would want that written down. They would want that roadmap for themselves that they could stick to and they could try and get to over the course of, I guess, several years, which again is not ideal considering the timing, but it would be hope. So because of that, it's incredibly frustrating that we have these delays, but I'd rather it be there than opposed to rushing into it and then giving the Glazers any wiggle room. But the point being is, as I mentioned earlier on, that the Glazers will always want that wiggle room, because the argument has always been there that they never wanted to sell in the first place. Therefore, they will always want to weigh out. Even if there is that roadmap for a full takeover, they'll want clauses and things put in there to say, well, actually, but on this date, we could maybe refuse, or we could reject, or we have the right to negotiate, or put the asking price up, whatever. These are not stupid businessmen. They're not. So we'll have to wait and see what happens and what the fallout is to all of that. But as I mentioned, we come out of the international break. It feels like, isn't it always with United, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So there is movement, but it's a very, very, very slow pace. And if you were hoping for some kind of impact in January, doesn't look too likely. Doesn't mean there's going to be no business done in January, because I think there is business to do in terms of outgoings, certainly with Jadon Sancho, possibly with some others. But as far as that Ineos overhaul, you might have to wait some time when it comes to that. So there you go, guys. Let me know your thoughts on the latest takeover, not really a takeover, developments, well, possible future takeover, I suggest, acquisition developments. Let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section below. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe, bottom right-hand corner. And if anything else breaks, I'll speak for you again very, very soon.